All right. Well, with that, then Mary, I'm going to turn it over to you for the networking portion, if you would like to share your thoughts and info. And then at 12 o'clock, we will hear from Bill Potts-Datema again. But Mary, let's go to the networking portion.
What do you want me to do?
Well, I'm not really sure. Do you want us to take a lunch break? And for those that wish to visit, just to stay active on this link here? Or
I think what we had in mind was that anybody that wanted, to sit and, talk or ask questions or visit, whatever, that's what we would do right now. And then if somebody needed to go get something, they could grab it and then come back and join the conversation. I think that's kind of what we had planned.
Okay. Just to keep an open channel right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. If anybody would like to do that, we're certainly here to answer questions or visit or discuss ideas or what have you. But it sounds like now would be a good chance to grab a little bite to eat or make those restroom breaks or get up and stretch your legs or... My house is finally quiet, so I think I'm just going to stay put, and anybody who wants to visit, I'm happy to visit.
I'm going to step away for a few minutes. Okay, I'll be muted.
Sounds good. Okay.
Miss Kristen, are you still there?
Yes.
So I'm actually in the planning phase of like putting all my thoughts on paper versus in my head for my fire department thing.
Okay.
And so when I have my brainstorming sheet out, I'll show you. But how I kind of go about setting up events when I'm looking at the academic piece is, when we usually have like those centers.
Chill out.
Oh, sorry.
Am I still talking?
Yeah. That's Mary. You are.
Is to really try to bring in some of those academic pieces. And so instead of just little like craft activities that what you're doing, like say, the Apple tissue papers or whatever, maybe have somebody reading a story there about apples while we're doing that activity, or, tying something, or so that's just kind of where my thought process goes. And I don't know if that's because I'm an early childhood educator. And so like I'm theme mind oriented. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize it wasn't on the camera. So I'll be happy to share my brain. Just know that it's kind of an ADHD brain, so it's not organized.
That's fine. It's like I like to put together game nights on a theme and incorporate some literacy, some math, or something. And
yeah, and I always tell people there is literally a child's book that will cover any topic. And so even starting, your game night with a story and then taking that opportunity or even starting your game night with a story about social emotional and about somebody who loses a game. And then, you take that opportunity to go play games and then who's winning and who's losing and how are you feeling? How am I feeling? Those sort of things.
Yeah. I like to do escape box games, as anybody who has worked with me knows.
Fun. Have you ever done a Kane's arcade where it's all like recyclable and the kids bring them in? So our PTA in Aviano did that, and we did it with it was a STEM kind of family theme, and every class promoted it. And basically it was an at-home activity where the kids would use recyclables to create an arcade game. And there's a YouTube thing, it's called Kane's Arcade. And this little boy, CAIN, I think he's like 10 or 11, and he created this giant arcade, and people would come and like pay him $0.25 to play these little games. And so we did that. And as a PTA, we just bought a whole bunch of tickets, and then people would come and like for $1, they got like 20 tickets, and they would go to each one of the kids' little games and play their little STEM game. And it was the coolest event because I saw so many parents just, you had some of these parents who went out and, did these huge things, and it was just really a cool interactive thing.
Can you share all those resources? That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, yes. I don't really have any resources on that because I have like the YouTube in my brain that helps with it.
The YouTube, any rules, guidelines, video links, anything to go with that, because that sounds like it would be something fun, and we could do it across cultures. And
absolutely, it was really fun. All right, I'm gonna go grab something to eat now. But can you tell my day quills kicked in from this morning? I'm a little bit more awake. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna do the same.
This is Lynn Telford, and I have a question for the group. And I do promise that soon I will turn on my camera, but I am still in full Saturday mode, so
It's okay.
I'm on my phone. We are, I think like most PTAs, struggling with not only just getting people to come help out at events, but just membership in general.
Mhm.
And one theme that I hear a lot from people is, I work full time and I have a few kids. And I think that that's the case for the majority of those who are helping on PTAs now. This isn't our mom's PTA or our grandma's PTA where the people helping with PTA weren't working. So I appreciate it as a working parent. I appreciate that I do prioritize time outside of work and other activities to do this. But just curious if you guys, I appreciated the national speaker's point on just those one-to-one connections, neighbors and other parents of your children's friends. But, as we have these events and we interact with people, curious to know if you guys have had any talking points that help with that. Because, we look at Kennedy and we have 500 students, which maybe is somewhere between 200 to 300 families. We only need 10%, of one parent to help with events. So it's not the commitment that I think people think of. So just curious what your strategies you guys have used or talking points that you've used to help people understand that, this really, we want it to be set up for working parents.
I guess a lot of times I tend to lead with a story about, I work full time and I do this and I do this. But mostly I want to tell them, I'm like, I need somebody to do this one thing. It's only going to take this much time. I just need a commitment for this one little thing. And if you break it up into pieces, people seem a lot more willing to jump in. That's the only thing I've found that has worked.
Several years ago, there was, let's see here, there was a movement or a campaign of getting people to just give 1 hour of their time. And I can't remember all of the details about that, but that helped people to not be overwhelmed with, oh gee, I don't have time to do that. But gosh, it was something about million hours or something. It was a national PTA campaign.
Okay, that just
so
really
that helped.
Yeah, that triggered a really good thought in my head of looking back at the events we've done in the past and then breaking them down by, do you only have 1 hour to commit? Then helping at our walkathon and handing out bracelets is a perfect idea. Do you have 2 to 4 hours? Then maybe you could do an event like our carnival that might take a few hours of planning. And then, so I like that idea because I completely agree with you. I mean, I think I was probably hesitant at the beginning too, due to my fear of overcommitting. And so I really do like that idea of looking back at the events we've done and then breaking that down. And do you just want to show up and help 1 hour? Are you willing to do some planning? Are you willing to lead? And then breaking that down by time commitment. And that I think is something we could create in a handout that we could use at the beginning of the year to help people decide what they want to help with. So thank you. That was very helpful.
Lynn, I also think that those like immediate kind of like, I have an event coming up and I need bracelets passed out for 30 minutes. Those are opportunities for like carpool and pickup lines where you can ask those face-to-face conversations, because honestly, it's harder to say no to a face-to-face ask. But when you're asking in that, hey, do you have 30 minutes? And the other thing is the hard part about all of this is, I think we've talked about this at a state level, it's talked about at a national level, is making that relevant. What is it relevant? Why is it relevant for those parents to be volunteering? What does it mean? What does it mean? And I think that's where we really have to draw back and why am I volunteering? I'm not volunteering just because my kid gets an extra Spirit Wear shirt or she gets popcorn on Fridays. Like what is the essence of my volunteering? And it's really rooting back to that academic support and that bridge and that pathway to what we know works best for learning, which is that home and school family connection. And I think that's really what we're all faced with, this, like, I don't know, brick wall, because how do we make it relevant so that volunteering isn't asking for people to donate kidneys. Volunteering is just normal because it's part of what you do to bridge that relationship, because we know it's important. So I wish I had a magic book to figure it out, but it's really getting into those families on a regular sort of, even, and especially the families we're not connected with, to let them know how important just you as your child's first teacher really are. So sorry.
No, I think that's really helpful too.
And I can throw a couple of different things in. If there is a concern about time, one of the reasons, I have plenty going on in my world too, but one of the reasons that I did this was to be engaged with my children in a school setting, to get to know their teachers, to get to know how kind of the school itself works, who to talk to, who not to talk to, different things like that. So as a parent, that was kind of one aspect for me. Plus, I wanted to get to know other parents. So is it hard to give the time? Sometimes it's harder than others, but a lot of the times I look forward to it because it engages me in their schools. One other angle I wanted to share with you, Lynn, is that if people don't have the time, they aren't able to give the time, it's still okay to ask, well, that's just great. Would you be willing to support the work we do so that the volunteers that we have can do that work? And so would you consider being a member, or would you consider a donation or anything like that, so that when you have your doers, they have something to work with? That has been kind of a shift at national PTA, and we'd love to have as many people involved as we can, but we get it, the world's busy. But for instance, you come to me and say, Nikki, I really would love to have you be a part of the PTA. And I'm just like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't take on anymore. Would be a perfect opportunity to say, well, would you be willing to make a donation so that we can continue our work for our kids in our building? And totally would do that. I don't know if you have seen some of the kind of funny envelopes that have gone around for a while on Facebook. It was, here's $15 and I'll bring a pan of bars, or
Don't do those.
we're not doing those? Okay.
We
All
tried
right.
that at Ed Clap, and we had to send out a letter because we had so much negative feedback on them.
Oh,
We
shoot.
threw out the second half for the next year.
Okay. So I was going to share the funny aspects of it, but apparently it was misinterpreted. So we won't go there.
Yeah, they were really funny. We thought it would be really good. Not so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. All right. Well, to finish the thought, Lynn, then the reason, don't do this, but so it would have different increments, and then it would say, like, here's $100, don't call me till next year, or something like that. But apparently that didn't go over well. So let's not repeat that.
We talked about that, didn't we, Jeff? Like some sort of upfront, if you want to donate $50 at the beginning of the year and not be asked again. But that is kind of hard to track, for one. And we don't do a lot of fundraising. You know, our walkathon brings in a lot of money because we want to focus on getting people together and not asking them for money.
Yes.
And I think that helps us as far as people know they can come to an event and not be asked, you know, for donations. I was curious, another thought crossed my mind just now is, do any of you do any sort of incentive or rewards for numbers of hours that people volunteer? So I'm taking notes as I go, and I thought, what if a person volunteered, if we track the hours, kind of like now they do at employers, right? Like my employer will reward me with, I work at Sanford, so Sanford wear if I volunteer so many hours. So if they volunteered 4 hours, could they get Kennedy wear? If they donated more than that, could we get some donations from businesses and have drawings? Do any of you do anything like that to incentivize or reward volunteer time?
I love that idea. I haven't seen or heard of it being done. I mean, people maybe are doing it, but I think that's amazing. You could have a rock star volunteer. I think the only thing I have here is I'm looking at my list. I've got some awards through state, but that has more to do with membership and, getting teachers enrolled in that. I love the idea of offering some incentive for volunteer work, and some people might really love that.
Right. Or they could, if they volunteered so many hours, the PTA could make a donation in their name, or I don't know how that would work either. Yeah. But anyway, I'll keep thinking of some ideas and I'll share thoughts I have on the Facebook page. But thank you guys. That's really helpful.
Wonderful. I can see that being very encouraging. And not everybody wants or needs to be thanked publicly, but I think most people kind of like a little something, just as we appreciate you, even if it's a private thing and they wear a t-shirt and somebody says, "Oh, cool t-shirt." And well, I got that for volunteering with PTA. And there is a North Dakota PTA store out there. It's shoppta.com. And you can click on North Dakota and you can see various PTA items from inexpensive to expensive. Maybe it's a PTA cup. Maybe it's a pen or a folder or something. I mean, there's all kinds of things you could do. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, maybe I'll add a little bit too. So this meeting is very representative of most PTA meetings, right? Which I'm one of few males that are attending. And so I think it's an untapped group of volunteers, right? To be able to figure out how do we get the other half of each family unit more engaged, right? It tends to be a struggle, and I'm no better at it than anybody else. So I'm trying to figure it out too. But I think oftentimes when we have volunteers who are men, they end up saying, "Well, I'm here because my spouse brought me," right? And so, how do we make it cooler for male figures in students' lives to be active, especially I'm speaking more for the elementary school probably than anything, right? So, I know there are groups like Watchdogs that are in some of the schools, and they're very closely associated with the PTAs to try to make it cooler for everyone to be part. But yeah, I think that's an untapped market, right, for us to be able to do it. And as I think of, Nikki, what you said earlier, the reason I'm in PTA is because I want to be engaged with my student and understand what's going on and be able to carry that bridge between home and school. Because if anything COVID has taught me over the last 18 months, education is not something you send your student at 8:02 and they come home at 2:32 and it's just done, right? It happens everywhere. And so as parents, how do we effectively work together if we're not involved with our schools? We can't just isolate it and say, "Hey, how was your day?" and then hope to educate our children for the rest of their time, right? So how do we help people understand that being involved in the end is much better for your student to get a full education?
Mm-hmm.
And to speak to that, Jeff, one of the PTAs, the elementary schools I was at, we had a couple dads. We had 2 or 3 dads heavily involved, and I praised them constantly because I said, the message you're sending your kids is school is important, and you care enough to be here, you care enough to help, you care enough to be engaged. And I think over the years, PTA has gotten a bit of a bad rap, and I think our world's changed. I think our perceptions have changed. We need anybody and everybody that is invested in their kids' education. So when we have men step up, I just really appreciate it. And at the national level, there's way more men. Our president 2 years ago, Jim Accomando, had come up in Connecticut through his PTAs. And we have had several men. I'd love to have more men. I don't like the perception that Hollywood gives us, so that it's a bake sale and we got to bake something and bring it and sit at a table. It's so much more than that. there's some really good resources I'm going to share this afternoon too about that. So Lynn, thank you for involving your husband. I hope he finds it an interesting experience and is happy to be here.
One thing I'll say about men too is I think it's important to not just say, here are the events we do at our school, which do you want to be involved with, but what skills do you have or interests do you have that you could bring to our school? So if you, like my husband's a huge sports fan, right? So how could we do something fun around sports or trivia, or what do you do professionally that you could come in and if you're, we do math night, could you come in, if you have a background in math and help with those sorts of things. So I think it's also about tapping the interests of the parents that we already have and asking them to bring those skills and interests to the school rather than saying, pick from this list and what you want to help with. So I think we've done a good job of that, but I know we have a lot of work yet to do.
And that absolutely hits that inclusivity piece of that. And really just, breaking that mold of what events we've always done just because we've always done them versus what will really drive our population to be involved. And our population wants to come and see their peers, right? They want to come see what their friends are good at or their parents. And that's exactly a way to do that. And I think that you're spot on with that in so many ways, because we all have different talents and not all of us are good at baking. In fact, I don't cook at all. So don't ask me to join a meal train. It's just not going to happen. But I'll sure buy a meal for somebody who's having a bad day or that sort of thing. And so I think it's just, and the other thought that I'm noticing also is, as we're talking about trying to get those families, is I think we really need to look into that birth through 5 community before they even hit our schools as well. Because we need to really start, and that's a mission that I'm on here just within my own job and what I do as a birth through 5 literacy and language coach. And so it's just really getting those families to understand how important their job is from the beginning. So that once they hit schools, they're ready to join PTAs, they're ready to be a part of that relationship. And I know that that's not necessarily a PTA thing, but there are early PTAs out there and just even building that relationship with them and reaching out and saying, hey, this is what PTA does when your kid comes to school.
Another thought this conversation is provoking for me, Lynn, I think you're absolutely spot on, and we'd love to expand whatever our PTAs offer. So I think asking if there's a talent or a skill or something they'd like to share with our families is awesome. Jeff had mentioned at the elementary level in particular, and then my mind, when you started to talk, Lynn, went to the middle school level, because middle school kind of tapers off and we start to struggle a little more to keep families involved. And some men aren't necessarily excited about working with little kiddos and their families, but they can really relate to the middle school and or even the high school crowd, which at both levels we see things taper off. So it would also be interesting to me to ask them who they'd be comfortable with. Maybe it's a financial piece, maybe it's a health piece, maybe it's a sports piece, maybe a dad just wants to get together and have an open gym type setting for PTA members, basketball, or get out on a hockey rink or something, depending on what their forte is. I think it's an amazing idea, and it's opened an entire box for me to go off and think about. So I thank you for sharing that. It's an excellent point. And everybody got really quiet. All right.
I can get on my soapbox. I can get on a family engagement soapbox, so I should stay quiet. It's probably best for all. Especially when we go into like the early childhood portion of it. I guess it's good to be passionate, right?
It is. And I'd like to learn more about it because we're so busy. I think we get caught up in focusing on our kids that are in school. We're not thinking about those that are headed that way. And I know that there's more and more push on those pre-K kiddos, and maybe that's a conversation we need to further explore.
Yeah, you got me thinking, Heather, on that one. Like, there's a daycare drop-off and pickup loop at the school, right? So every day, at beginning and the end of the day, all those daycares are there, and many of them are preschools as well. How do we connect with those preschools who are feeding kids into our kindergarten programs and start talking to those families and being engaged in the preschool level?
Absolutely.
As a PTA, right? Because the next year they're probably going to be in our building. So how do we
absolutely
how do we help bridge that gap? There's not a good signal that says that family's coming to our school, but at least we know what institutions have kids that are aligned with our school somewhat, right?
And yeah, just even getting I hate to use the word buzzword, but getting that name, that logo, that support system in there, especially those first time moms and dads who are first time kindergarten parents who are scared already anyway, and their Bibsy's leaving them, and oh my goodness, but they've already got a familiar face there or a familiar logo that they've seen or something in and out, and maybe even host. Now that I'm thinking, see, Kristen, this is my ADHD brain, but maybe in the spring you host something within those little daycare facilities of just like a meet and greet where it's like, hey, your kid, for all incoming kindergartners that are heading into Kennedy, whatever, or pair with some other PTAs, and this is what we have available. And just so because the first of the year comes so crazy for those new kindergarten parents anyway. They got to get all the right clothes and the right bows in their hair and the right school supplies and the right everything. And so just, one more PTA thing is maybe getting that word out even before they're there gets that generated a little bit.
As you're talking, Heather, I see it as almost, if we make that connection with those preschool kiddos, as they move into school, they may come to feel as though they have a partner or a friend as they begin this endeavor called school. I think it's great.
Absolutely. And other states even have early childhood PTAs. We just don't have the population for that yet, but I know Colorado does. And it really is focused on those preschools that are coming in. But again, it's just kind of nice to have that. Why can't I think of the word consistency, or between what and go. I know this space. I know these people. I know that these are support. I want to help. I know I have this skill. Who do I tell? I might be intimidated to talk to my teacher. I might be intimidated to, but I can do this. It's just that that relationship, that first and friendly, not necessarily professional relationship. That mom, that family that I can talk to you about my kid and my fears sort of thing,
I'm going to throw this out here. I've been listening to all of this, I guess now almost an hour. But I'm wondering, when we talk about inclusiveness and individualized, and we're talking about these little preschoolers and the fear of, their fear, their parents' fear, have we ever stopped and taken the time to think about the special needs children and their families?
And that's also a great community to hit. Yes.
They have more fears than the little pre-Ks and their parents coming into a new building, because they have more piled on their plate than, getting their children ready for school. It's how am I going to get them there? How am I going to get them to get through a day? And those parents, they actually feel that they're the only one facing those problems. And so there has to, and I know we did have a special education PTA several years ago, but I think that, and the reason that they don't join PTA and they don't join in the activities is mostly their children can't handle all of the extra stimulation, and they do feel alone because of that. and other things. So that is a group that is actually very untapped.
That's a fantastic idea. As the niece and daughter of special ed teachers, I have actually personally signed my family up to volunteer with North Dakota Special Olympics. But, again, I think the hard part sometimes is it is a small group within the school, or I grew up with, they had their own classroom, right? So you kind of knew how many students there were and you knew what activities they had. And now with the integration, I think for me, I know it's hard for me to know how many students we have at my son's school, but I think that's a fantastic idea to partner with our principal to see, even if what if we had events just for those, events for those kids, but have some of the other students come and volunteer and help. Like my son would love to help, teach kids soccer or basketball or just kind of be a coach. So how could we have some events where maybe it wouldn't be so overwhelming to those students? But that's a great idea. I really appreciate that thought.
And with that, like the birth through 5 piece again, like I know here in Grand Forks, we have preschools that are very specific for those needs, that are working on those early childhood needs. Because I'm partnering with them right now for language and literacy things. And those would be great sort of partnerships as well to start those relationships with those. We have ECSE classrooms here within our public schools as well. And those are preschools. And those are special needs students. And so I think that those are also opportunities to capture that what PTA can be and let them be the voice for what their children need and what they can get out of this opportunity.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Oh, I'm so glad that we've had this discussion. God, this is just great. And as much as I don't want to cut this off, I'm trying to get all kinds of ideas together for us to continue this conversation after this event. I kind of just want to keep going, but I see that Bill has joined us again, and I want to hear what he has to say too.